Hey everyone, Libros here. Before we dive into today's episode, which I'm really looking forward to, I just wanted to record this quick message to say thank you for stopping by. Thank you for choosing to listen to this podcast. You're in for a treat with my guest today, Mr. Ash Phillips, as we discuss community, tribes, the importance of community, the importance of relationships, the importance of tribes in a way for our health ultimately, and to live ultimately our best lives as well. So you're in for a treat today. Ash is a great guy. He's also a startup professional. So he's in the startup world, great entrepreneur. I have the pleasure to be working with him on some projects as well. And so, yeah, thank you for stopping by and choosing to tune into Raising Consciousness. Now let's hop on over into today's episode. Ash Phillips, thank you for joining me here on the podcast today. It's a pleasure to have you on. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, so I'm glad we found the time to do it. Yeah, again, thank you for joining me. I always like to start off episodes by giving a little bit of context to the audience into who's joining me, who the guest is. So for context, who is Ash Phillips and why? What do you do and why do you do what you do?
You're asking me an existential crisis. I don't really know sometimes. Yeah, why I do what I do is my favorite question as well. So I am what I do and who I am right now is an entrepreneur. I've been a founder for over 10 years now, and an advisor of other founders for over 5 years now. Pretty good at it, won some awards for it, and I failed a lot as well. And so yeah, I mostly advise people by telling them the things not to do, which is far more valuable than I think we get credit for sometimes, certainly in the UK. But I've been doing that and ended up building communities, albeit accidentally sometimes, and I'll bet the rest of the time, a big group of people that are what we call unreasonably ambitious. And those unreasonably ambitious people are the people that we serve through a company called Rebellious Co. Rebellious Co designs and delivers ecosystems of support for unreasonably ambitious people, primarily people that are building or involved in the startup space. We do that through our own programs and products, like Rebel Meetups, which are then globally different as a community for future leaders, but also in partnership with other brands to help them design their operations and their programmatic support for startups and similar types of people. So yeah, I do that. Naturally, it means I've been exposed to a whole bunch of opportunities, which has been awesome, and I don't take for granted at all. And it means I get to spin a lot of plates, which really scratches the ADHD itch that I get every single day. But that kind of helps me answer the other question, which is like why I do what I do. I think there are both like, I know we'll probably talk about this at some point anyway, there's probably holistic and scientific reasons, nature and nurture reasons why I do what I do. People with neurodivergence are 3 times more likely to start a business than anybody else. So I'm just a statistic in that case. But also I'm a rebel, right? That's why our whole brand is built around that. I'm the first one to go to uni in my family. I'm the first one to drop out of uni in my family. The first person to start a business in my direct family. And yeah, and so I make a bit of a living out of being a contrarian and helping other people do the same thing. The irony is that we find all those contrarians and we put them together because that contrarianism is the thing that connects them. But yeah, on the good days, the bad days, and everything in between, that's what gets you out there, helping people, sometimes to my own detriment, but by helping people do better, helping people achieve the things they want to achieve in a practical sense, not just like a high level spiritual sense, but certainly in an awesome one, you know. But yeah, people get that, and that's
And what's like the backstory in, because you could have done probably anything, right? So you've chosen this is your path. You've chosen business and the startup world in particular as your path. And as you said, you're very good at it. I can give testament to that because obviously we're working together, and I'm also involved with the meetups and stuff, which are amazing. And I'm very happy to be part of the hosting team. Yeah, like talk just a little bit more about like the backstory and how you got into what you do.
Yeah, man. So yeah, firstly, thank you for being part of it, because we couldn't do this stuff if people like we didn't exist, you know. We got to a point where I'll get to that point actually in a second, but yeah, it then started because I was running another business before, it's own marketing agency before with a business partner. I had various networking events. It's my job to go in the business and talk to other people and build networks and relationships. And I was pretty good at it, but I would turn up to events and people would be 10, 20, 30 years my senior, talking like houses, kids, retirement. I didn't know what any of those things are. I still don't know what those things are. And wanted to create a space where people were just culturally similar to me, generally from a generational point of view, or at least from an attitudes point of view. And I did, and I set up the meetup in a bar in Bristol, in the UK, just for those who are international and listening. And yeah, and it was great. Like 5, 6 weeks, it turns out it wasn't huge, but we all kind of shared a beer, shared some woes, and talked about the things that were great and not so great throughout the day, the week, the year, the job, and in itself. We all really enjoyed it, and they asked when the next one was. And the really long story short is that I just next month and we run them at the Sense, and then people came from everywhere else, and someone came from Bath, which isn't too far away, and said, "Hey, this is kind of annoying to come to on the train. Can you run one there?" And I said yes, and then I kept saying yes, and after a while, the point I was going to get back to is I was up in the motorway to Bristol, Bath, Birmingham, Cardiff, London, and Manchester every single month, completely free, because these events are always free and they will always be free, to ensure they're accessible, not needing to therefore afford to stay over and therefore driving back every night. Manchester's three-ish, 3.5 hours drive from Bristol, so coming back and getting home at 1 a.m. to get up and do some stuff again, all because of something. It wasn't money because it wasn't making us any. So that's kind of the origin story, and then you get a certain distance into that, and you realize, one, you can't go to every single event, so you need to find really passionate, really connected and interested people locally in their own towns and cities to run those events, people like you, so that we can have those happen without you needing to be there and offer the best of the events. I run because you guys know your cities and towns better than I do. And then, yeah, the other thing that happened is that people started to ask what they could buy. They said, "Hey, this free thing is great. Like, what do you sell? How does this keep running?" And the answer was, well, nothing. So we came up with this paid community, people would join it, and we've been iterating it ever since. It's been, there are times where it's been amazing, times where it's been dead. I think any community manager that told you it was always amazing, they'd be lying. So, we've been through peaks and troughs and ebbs and flows, but moving into a new phase now, and excited to see where it goes. But yeah, that's kind of the origin story and brings you, I guess, up to date.
And in terms of communities, so I've done a lot of kind of research on and study on health, etc. And one of the things I've kind of found fascinating is the importance of actually our relationships when it comes to our health, right? The quality of our relationships, who we spend our time with. There's this, saying around in the personal growth space, something like, you become the average of the 5 people you hang out with, etc., etc., etc. I've been around, some people who just are completely different to me and like frowned upon everything that I was doing. I guess felt like a rebel, but just kind of like an outcast and stuff. And obviously now I've kind of found different community and stuff. And so the point I'm kind of getting at is that relationships and community is vitally important for our health. We're social creatures, etc. What's your kind of take on, and what have you seen from running this community, from running communities, from running events, on like the importance of having those like-minded people around you, people who support you in your journey, and just from like a relationship kind of standpoint, if that makes sense?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, I'm probably going to say very little that's brand new, but I think that's true for a lot of people, is that we're mainly just kind of amalgamating lots of advice and anecdotes, thoughts from people that have said things before. I mean, communities and relationships are one of the oldest structures that probably exist between humans ever, if not the oldest, right? Like, the moment that the first two people got together and had a baby was the moment that, society began, right? And you could talk about chicken and egg, of course, and evolution, but we won't go that far back. However, society today exists because groups of people are attracted to each other magnetically. We have towns and cities for a reason. We have villages for a reason. There are people that live in the middle of nowhere, fine, but like, there is strength in numbers from a protection point of view. If you're thinking evolutionarily, right? It's better to be hunted by a line if there's 30 of you to fight back than there is if there's one of you to be eaten, I guess. So that's true. But then obviously that plays out different economically when you think about capitalism now. Well, it's easier to go to a shopping centre, and it's surprising when you see a McDonald's next to a KFC next to a Burger King. You think that's a bit silly, but it actually makes sense because of the way they normally go. So like all adults, we're all kind of drawn together. I think a lot of the time that line, and I know this is sort of content and topics that you discuss on this podcast, a lot of the time the lines between whether that's scientific or whether that's holistic, whether that's energy or whether that's logic and physics and biology and chemistry, that line is blurred. I don't know. I don't profess to be an expert in either. I have spent over a decade building communities, so there's some interesting anecdotes that I've observed. I mean, anything that's ever been built or changed or moved forward was probably done by a group of people. I think it's a quote. I actually have it somewhere because I knew I was going to bring it up and I always misquote it, and you said it. Margaret Mead. So Margaret Mead said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed individuals can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing it ever has." I just love that quote because it reminds us that, it's the power of people, right? And then again, borrowing another thought from another expert, Maslow, right? A hierarchy of needs. Belonging is right there on one of the bottom rungs, if not the bottom rung, of the needs that we have as people. We want to feel like we belong. And that plays out so obviously in this community that I've built in possibly the most ironic way, because our community is about being different. I mean, we literally call it different. And the thing that makes people different is ironically the thing that ties them together. And we probably saw this growing up. I don't know, you were like maybe than me, but like as you grow through school, there are different types of groups of people and they gravitate towards each other, right? When I was at school, aging myself here, there was the chavs, the city people, the emos, the jitters, we would call them, the skaters, the drama group, etc. And they would all group together in these little compartments. And there's glue that plugged each of those together. If we said, all the humans get a room, everyone get in a room, fine, everyone that skates get a room, and that would be a very specific group of people. How they group together, and that's what fascinates me, is that those differences are the things that make them similar. And I think you see that now more recently, not a modern term anymore either, but in hipsters, right? People that were hipsters were alternative for the sake of being alternative, but they all did their changes in a very similar way, which ironically made them similar to each other, and therefore they were accidentally stereotyped and put into a group. So, yeah, I think belonging and community are at the core of basically everything. It's the reason why people buy iPhones. This isn't an iPhone, right? But it's the reason why if I send somebody a text message rather than a WhatsApp message, they'll have an opinion on me because of the color of the message that comes through. Because there is a community, a belonging that exists with being involved in the Apple ecosystem, and the fact that you're receiving an iMessage or an SMS instead. I'm brain dumping a load of little anecdotes there that we can probably jump off from, but the moral of the story between all of that is that people are everything. How they think, how they feel, the way they work and the way they move are all the things that make up community and society. And in business, where I operate, those things are vital to understand, because people are your customers.
I love what you said in terms of about the things that make us different from like I guess I kind of went to from like a societal kind of perspective, actually within the community makes us similar. And I don't think that, because sometimes it's hard, right? Sometimes it's hard when, especially in kind of like how we met and in the industries that kind of we're in and what we both do in terms of creative stuff, entrepreneurship, etc., that oftentimes you do feel a bit of like an outcast, right? And so I think just reminding ourselves of those things, as you said, and trying to find our tribe or our people who are like us, can sometimes be a challenge, but I think is something that it's part of the journey, right? It's part of the quest, I guess, as well. There was one thing I wanted to ask was in terms of have you building obviously different and rebel meetups from like a community kind of perspective, what have been some of those ups and downs that you've faced, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I
Is it
think
because at
one
the end of
of
the day you're dealing with people, and so people aren't always, I guess, I don't know, like easy. We're not like the easiest creatures,
I
So
think
when you're
people
building
are
community, it can be.
actually no. I would. I'll just think devil's advocate because I agree with people are complex creatures, but I think we're actually a lot more predictable than we think. You know,
True.
poker is poker is a world popular game, and it operates purely on the fact that people act a specific way when specific stimuli are presented to them. And the people that win at poker are the people that understand that best, and they can understand those tells and those signs and the way that people are going to either double down or call. And it's all about predictability, right? Yeah, sure, predictability of the cards, but predictability of how someone's going to react to a card or not. And that's because people are somewhat predictable. Now, we've built a business around people that are unpredictable, right? So the business for us is that I want to find people that aren't happy with the status quo. They want to change it. But ironically, in doing that, they are somewhat predictable. Because as I said at the top of the call, I'm statistic because having, neurodivergence, I'm 3 times more likely to start a business. Now, starting a business isn't a normal thing, right? Getting a job is a
Mm.
good thing. So starting a business is often against the status quo, or at least considered against the status quo statistically. But I'm 3 times more likely to do it because of my circumstances, and therefore I'm somewhat predictable. If I'd known that I had ADHD as a kid, you might have made an assumption that I might start a business at some point, and have been more likely to make the correct judgment as a result of that. So there's things right at the back, so all of this predictability stuff. But again, you can look at this with and I'll come back to my ups and downs in the business in a second, but you see the same with like relationships. People often look for people they have something for something they have not going to look for something that they have in common with everyone. They're only going to look for something they have in common with that select person that they may be, in that case, physically attracted to. Because if you turn up for a date and you go, "Oh my god, you're a human too," then like there's jokes there to be made about level of standards, sure, but like that level of commonality is what you have in common with 8 trillion other people. So you're looking for something that makes you both different, but something that ties you both together, because that makes that bond special. And so that's what we're doing and thinking every part of our lives, right? You ever meet someone that you have literally nothing in common with, you either never see them again, and that's probably the case, but there may be a very minute piece of curiosity there, which is that if I don't have anything in common with this person, they don't have anything in common with me. Like, I just feel a bit of a challenge to try to find out what that is or build something in common. Ironically, that will mean that you both have something in common, which is that you're trying to connect with each other, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's ironies and messengers to be made all the way through this. For me, with the ups and downs in the community, and I say all of that because it prefaces the answer that I'm going to give now, which is that the predictability of people is basically what I had to rely on with one of the perceived challenges that was less of a challenge than I realized in the business, which was when we had to go from 5, 6 cities to more. Our first expansion outside of the UK was Melbourne. And you can't get any further around the world before you start coming back, basically. I've never been to Australia. The closest I've ever got is Hong Kong. That's pretty far. And that was for an event too. But Melbourne, I've never been. I've never stepped foot in Australia. We've had an event there. How do you launch an event in a place that's a physical event that you've never been to, you're not culturally aware of, within reason? I mean, it's very westernized society, like the UK, because half of them from the UK. How do you do that? And you do it by trusting people, right? You trust in normal assumptions. No one wants to run a bad event. No one wants to look silly in front of a room. And most people, this is Occam's razor, but most people don't want to screw people over. And so you trust in those things and the predictability of people to mostly be, connected by those truths. And then it works. You give people the book, the handbook to follow, as you've read and now you do. And people run an event and it goes well. And you know that because you're one of them. You're one of those people that I trust living laughs. Luke's running the events in Gloucester. He doesn't want to run a bad event. He wouldn't want to look silly. He wouldn't want to screw me over. And those are things that I need to know are true before I let some one of our events. And when I do, they're going to do their best because they care about me naturally because we've got a relationship, but mostly they care about themselves and their own self-preservation. And if they're involved in it, they're going to make it go well. And the best analogy to use for that is like teaching a kid to ride a bike. You can hold that saddle for as long as you want to keep that kid riding straight and upright. But at some point, you have to let it go. And that kid does not want to fall off that bike, so they're gonna self-preserve as much as they can. And so that was one of the things I had to learn about people. And I don't know whether that's a comment on community and relationships, but kind of it. I trust in you, allows you to do what you do without me getting in the way, and it allows me to deliver on the purpose that I have as a wider community by doing that. And I think, I'm just being really obvious here, but that is literally how every company ever and every movement ever and how every community ever works, right? We have local elections because we trust, supposedly, certain people to enact the ways and the views of the people. Unfortunately, in the UK, it doesn't play out like that very often, but like that's how society works. We trust others. Therefore, that part of humans is somewhat predictable. Unfortunately, we can't trust all humans because that's why socialism doesn't really work in practice, unfortunately. But there are a few things about people that you can somewhat predict. At least Stockton Fraser is very likely they're going to be that way.
You've kind of spoken about it there. It seems to be a vital part of just building relationships, right, with people. What's your, as you were talking there in terms of the process of people becoming local hosts for the meetups, it seems like you place a lot of trust, as you just kind of spoke about. Where does that trust come from? And you might have already touched upon it, but I just kind of want to dive on it a little bit more because, sometimes, because there's this thing around you got to earn trust, right? But when we connected, I came to, I think, 2 Rebel Meetups in Bristol, expressed interest in when and running Gloucester. We didn't really know each other. And obviously I went through the process, but then you trusted me to run the first event, and I ran the second event. You then came up and spoke at one. So, and then it's been over time that I guess that trust has been solidified, or it's kind of, obviously our friendship and relationship is grown, right? But yeah, I want to get you some more of your thoughts on trust, which seems to be a vital part of relationships. But sometimes people, because they believe that trust is earned.
Yeah, I think trust is earned, but how do you earn it in the first place? Someone's got to give at some point, because if no one gives and you're just a rotten at a hard place, right? And no one ever earns anything from anyone. You can do that in marginal games, which is what a lot of people do, but I don't think you move fast enough to make real change unless you take big leaps, and that's what I've done. And yeah, you're going to get burnt probably at some point along the way, but over time you hone that intuition, which kind of eats us more towards the holistic side of things. But intuition for me is just the sum of a bunch of micro signals that add up over time. Having done this for over 10 years, knowing the sort of person, the type of mentality, the type of attitude that I'm looking for. So then I can just do this really quick workflow diagram in my head or checkbox exercise, a practical one, but something that all eventually just makes you go, yeah, this person seems good, let's do it. And sometimes it doesn't work out, but most of the time it does. And I think that trust primarily comes from the fact that I'm making it bet and I'm making it bet that you are doing this for the right reason. Our community pre-filters people. People often ask how we let the right people in our community, and the right people is a loaded word, but the right people we need brand aligned, values aligned, and aligned with that mission where we go. And the answer is that we do that through careful branding exercises. I get really nerdy at that. It's been in place over a long time, but the iconography we use, the language we use, the color schemes we use, the imagery we use, all of that adds up. It's a pretty filter, so that when you arrive at a conversation with me and you say, hey, do you want to run an event? I already know that you are mostly the perfect person for that, because you pre-filter yourself. The very fact of having that conversation means that they trust you probably. There's still a tiny little margin of error, obviously. But yeah, I think it's just understanding this almost universal truth that aside from trust, usually that's the case, and therefore they're probably not going to screw you over. I think we're just kind of desensitized to, or oversensitized actually, not desensitized, but oversensitized to potential downsides because of popular culture, media, the sort of stuff we watch, sort of stuff we read, etc. In maybe I'm wearing the rose tinted glasses, but I also live my little life where I'm pessimist the whole time. I want to assume everyone's good. Even the bad guys think they're doing good, right? The bad guys don't know they're bad guys most of the time. That's just naivety and arrogance. There's a great Mission Web sketch where they're basically in World War II. It's a parody of the Germans and the Nazis, and they're basically having a conversation about how they think they're doing good, and they joke about the fact that their helmets have skulls on, and they're like, "Wait, are we the baddies?" Like even the bad people don't know they've had people. Most people intend good things. The difference is when different opinions come together, and obviously some nefarious and some not. Some are obviously nefarious in the example I just gave for real world example of those people. Very obviously at odds with most of what humanity believes, but like mostly believe. And that's basically where my core truth comes from. And therefore I say, beautiful you die, let's go. And then we have a call, as we did, and I sense check. And as long as I feel like you're not going to use it to, start a pyramid scheme, build a cult, do anything nefarious, then we're good to go, right? And then I check that over time, and then the relationship grows. But that can't happen. That act of having someone run an event for us somewhere else can happen unless I put a tiny bit of trust in you, maybe more than a lot of people would give. I'm willing to give that because it works out well in the majority of cases. And just as what Remy said, a small group of people that are committed and thoughtful can change the world. And so I'm trying to be the person that brings those people together so that we can do that together. So that's that. I think there's one final bit to add into here, which is, and I don't know the statistic, but people are more likely to trust you and like you if you ask them for a favor, which is weird, right? Like normal logic would suggest that if you ask someone for something, they'll probably feel like you're trying to take from them. But actually it's an expression of trust, an expression of connection, an expression of giving. Hey, can you do something for me? Oh, I have this person trusting me enough to do something for them. It actually strengthens the relationship by asking someone to do something for them. So in the very act of me saying, hey Luke, would you be up for hosting our events in Gloucester? If you haven't already suggested that you would do that, I can't remember who mentioned it first. But like there's a relationship there that gets strengthened inherently by me saying yes and you saying yes, and me asking you to do it or you asking if you can. So it's not give and take, it's like give, and sometimes chunkier amounts of give, but those relationships get stronger over time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, total sense. Question I wanted to actually put to you was, do you feel like you're a social person? And by that, I mean, do you feel like you need to be around people in order to thrive?
That's a good question. I hate both. And I know people use the word can be there, but I think a lot of people cringe at that title. But I think, just like everything, everyone's on a spectrum of some kind in most cases, and I think it's the same for introversion and extroversion, right? And sometimes we need more, sometimes we need less. There's again science, probably holistic aspects to this as well. Lots of people might talk about the transfer of energy, and I would talk about the requirement to rest and recuperate. And that's why I'm incredibly empowered by people. People provide me with energy. I love talking to them. When I'm at our events, I'm a bit of a machine. Like I'll talk to everyone and I can connect everyone. I'll hyper connect everyone. People are in groups. You should chat to them. I'll play a bit of an orchestrator and puppet master, and I love that role because it makes me feel important. Great, but it also means that I'm helping people get by, and that's our inherent mission in my vocation. But when the event finishes and I go home, I don't want to speak to anyone for hours, sometimes days.
Mm.
And people find that weird. And they're like, you must love people. And depending on the hour you ask me that question, my answer will be absolutely, or it might be, no, I actually hate people. And then they find the latter weird because they're like, your whole business is about people. Well, I don't entirely hate people. I think I've used that phraseology before in the wrong way. Like it's just a flippant way to describe something that's a bit more complex. What I actually mean is that I don't hate people. I just love my own space and time. I need it. I need it to recharge, to rest, and be my best version of myself when I am around people. So I think I'm just quite extreme. I need lots of like solitary time, and I also need lots of group time in like contrast. Like I'm learning to love more as I get older, and I think this is the case for a lot of people. But I'm learning to love, you know, deep connections with few people at a time. I actually love, as you probably remember me saying multiple times, but I love our events in smaller cities because we get to have deeper conversations with a few people in a small group. But I think also at great examples. Bristol and London are amazing. You get to meet loads of awesome people, but you don't get anything deep because you're going to get called from one conversation to another and moved around the room or whatever be doing it for you. Whereas the reason why we go to the pub with friends, the reason why we have campfire conversations, is because that deep connection is where we really feel valued by people because we're telling stories and we're getting quite deep. It's the reason why people, ironically and quite meta, it's the reason why people love listening to podcasts and why they love being on and why they love heart because they get to have long, deep conversations with people. It builds trust and relationships. So yeah, I do like people. I find them fascinating, evidently, but I do keep myself away from them as well. I think just to recharge and to be myself.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to some of that. And how long has that taken you to kind of learn about yourself?
A long time. A long time. It's an ongoing process because I think
Mm.
we're never the same person for any longer than 5-10 years, right? We change. We change with life cycles. We change with our biology. We change with a whole bunch of things. You know, I'm a very different person to the person I was 10 years ago, and that person was very different to the person they were 10 years ago. I mean, in that case, biologically, you know, taller, stronger, probably didn't have as deep a voice when I was 14. But you know, there's different versions of it throughout life, and I think those versions will adapt, and the way I interact with people will adapt, and all of those things. You know, as I get older, may have a partner, may have kids, I'll be a different person at that point. If I don't, that's fine, but I'll still be a different person in a different way. You know, at that point, I'll be more solitary, but less solitary. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I know it's who I am right now. I do sometimes do find the self-awareness thing, you know, this is probably a whole other podcast, but self-awareness stuff is great, but also a little bit of a Pandora's box. Sometimes I wish I could close it, I can. And I spoke to a psychologist yesterday, actually, just had a conversation, had some conversation with someone who's qualified as a psychologist. He was talking about, you know, the spiral that can happen for someone that has practiced self-awareness a lot. Like the ability now that I have to self-analyze myself, and the ability that I have now to analyze my self-analysis puts me in a little bit of a spiral sometimes. That's not
Mm.
necessarily negative, but it certainly is a circle of coming back on myself and just why am I thinking the way that I'm thinking about the way that I'm thinking about myself? Um, and that wastes a lot of time. And what I'm really learning, which ironically I think my 21-year-old self was better at, was just I had to trust my intuition, which is probably just a brief that's the version of the thing that I just explained, but one that doesn't take time to analyze it and just does it. It's probably got it wrong a bit more often, but at least it's stuff where it's now. I get stuff in analysis paralysis and things. So yeah, that's where it comes from. It's just it took me a long time. It's probably taken my whole life, but practically speaking, it's probably from the time I started my business at 21 up till now. So you know, 13, 14 years probably. Yeah, and forevermore, I imagine.
Interesting. Like again, I relate so much to like the self-awareness kind of part. And I mean, we were speaking, I think back in January when we started to kind of work together, that I was kind of had this idea around, it was actually around a community called Super Conscious, right? Because I kind of realized that actually it kind of was based around the concept of being like so aware of stuff, like so, yeah, like, and then I kind of refer to it as like super conscious, super aware, super awareness, etc. Because I kind of resonated with that. Like, I'm a huge writer, so journal quite a lot. And then sometimes when I like, and then I would reflect on my reflections, right? And it's just like, when does it stop, right? So I can definitely relate to that. Yeah. So like,
It's a good point, because I was going to jump in here just quickly. This is your podcast. I don't want to like take it off the rails, but I was just curious about how you observe that then. How do you feel about the whole journaling about your journaling, or analyzing your analysis of yourself? Like, do you think it's a good thing? Do you think it's a bad thing? How do you observe that? And how do you use it if you do?
so interesting. So recently I've tried to like keep things more simple and like keep the main thing like the main thing. So like and I kind of use journaling now, or try to use it more of just like I want to say like a capture mechanism, right? So to capture thoughts, to capture ideas, to capture kind of things that have feelings, etc. And then try and like puzzle together, I guess, and as a self discovery tool. Um, One thing it did really help me with was just like getting just mental chatter. You know, I took this program quite a while ago, probably actually last year, I think it was, and the teacher was talking about like how we have all this mental chatter, right? And our mental chatter isn't necessarily us; it's just like the thoughts that are kind of going off in our minds, you know, and that actually sometimes we attach to them too much, right? And just to kind of let go. So I kind of now going through that, just tend to like do brain dumps and then just let them be. And then if another thought comes up and I link it back to that, then I would try and link them together to like create a puzzle to learn about myself. One actually thing I did recently was how everything needs to lead to a lesson, right? So if I can learn something, then in my mind I'm growing and I'm moving forward, rather than just kind of like going around in that circle, if that makes sense. So I don't know if that answers your, you know, the kind of the thing we're talking
Yeah,
about,
it's just
but
an interesting observation.
yeah, no,
It
yeah,
was
because like
open-ended question, so I'm curious, but I would share.
no, it's yes, it's an evolution, you know, and I think that it's something that I'm constantly kind of working with. But that actually reminded me of one thing I want to ask, because we've spoken about intuition quite a lot. And I guess that intuition for me kind of comes into it in the way, like if I have a gut feeling or just a feeling that actually I want to spend more time around a particular, maybe I write down an idea, like I'll kind of go there. And I think it's just, I've kind of learned to trust that and to like go with the energy. What's your take on kind of on intuition? Because like some people think like it's not a thing, right? Other people are like we're well into it. Do you think it's more of like a mind
Yeah.
thing, a gut thing? Like, where do you kind of stand with that, and how have you used it in your life?
Well, again, I'm not qualified biologist, I'm not qualified chemist or psychologist, but anecdotally, as far as I'm aware, the gut has, a huge number of nerve endings and is therefore somewhat a second brain. So the feeling you
Mm.
get in your gut, the physical feeling is representing something. Do I believe that that is a thought process playing out physiologically? I don't know. But I think intuition is about, I mean, we've used the word a lot already, but it's about trust, right? It's about things that we inherently know, that we inherently feel. And I can try to explain these things, and sometimes I can't. And that's where I start to blur and draw the lines between myself being a fairly logical, scientific person and things just feeling like the right thing to do. But if I do try and explain it, then I can come up with some reasoning because I'm a hyper-rational person. And the reason I come up with is that intuition for me is the built up signals nanoseconds over time that have been experienced over minutes, hours, weeks, years of life, that I've been doing the experiment multiple times a day, every single day for that whole period, and then realizing what the result is every single time. So when a decision or a question presents itself to me that requires a decision, I will feel a certain way about the decision that I should make. And then, I might not know the reason why that decision is the one that I want to make consciously, because I might not be able to explain it out rationally there and then. But what I'm probably doing, at least I feel like I'm doing in my case, is adding up the sum of experiences that are similar previously to give me an informed decision for this one right now. And so I've been trying to practice that a little bit more, and I think it's standing me in good stead. As I said, I think I used to do it as a 20-something-year-old, but I would probably be at that point right at the top of the Dunning-Kruger effect with a mini god complex, thinking I know everything before dropping right on the bottom and realizing I knew nothing. And I'm probably slightly on my way back up here now, right? Which is that I realize I don't know anything, so now I'm trying to learn as much as I can about it so I can make the rational decisions. But I'm at the halfway up those curves. So if this is the bell curves, at the top of the first bit before the dip and up the second bit after the dip, I'm probably doing similar things. The difference between the two things I'm doing there is that the latter part of me is able to explain it now. The part before wasn't. And would just play it off as well. Obviously, it's the right thing to do, or it felt like it was the right thing to do. So that's kind of where I feel that comes from. I mean, there's a book that I've spoken about multiple times to you, and I keep I should be on an affiliate scheme for this book, to be honest, because I love it so much. But the expectation effect talks about how I perceive it in a really similar way, right? Like it's a great book, recommended to everybody. And in the book, it talks about how The Secret is actually quite a good book in some cases and a really bad book in others. And that's his opinion, not my representative of the podcast, obviously. But the point he makes is that there's a lot of science in there that it doesn't realize is science, and that's really interesting to me. Whereas in the expectation effect, it plays that out in terms of science. So, like, if I have a pot of placebo pills in my cupboard and I take them, and I know that placebo, it will still have a marked impact statistically on my physiological circumstances, even though I know it's a sugar pill, because I've taken a pill. And so what I'm trying to get at with that is that there's something in there, right? Something that's a little bit more mysterious. And there's probably some science in it around psychology, convincing yourself, and the hormones that our body is secreting and certain exercises, etc. Probably something similar to what I'm doing when I'm making a decision based off of intuition. Is that if this feels right, it probably is. I'm not going to be able to explain it right now, but my body, my brain, something is pointing me in that direction. You know, and get to a fork in the road immediately, or left or right. You're going to make a decision. You might not be able to explain why left or right is the right one, but you're going to make this. And then I tried to come up with tricks, right? Because for myself, to trick myself into doing this quite good. Because if I'm presented with a menu at a restaurant, that menu is too big. It takes me ages to decide what I want. Because I've got everything and nothing. Whereas if I get to the menu, it's so much easier. I'm like, well, don't like that, so I'll just order that. Done, easily. So how do I make that initial decision faster? And in a business context, it's more, well, I could hire 1 or 10 people. How do I decide which one is the right one? I need to decide quick because I can't keep people waiting. If I do that with my investor hat on, I've got 10 deals I want to do. But I only have money for one of them. How do I pick the one? I need to make that decision quickly because these people need a fast no, right? I need to do these things with ideally objective answers, but what about, quick, subjective, intuitive answers? And I had a session with a therapist not too long ago, where we dived into this day specifically. And he gave me a really fun trick to go away with it. And it's funny because you don't even need to do it practically to play it out. But basically what he said was flip a coin. Now, when someone says that, now I'm a raises and I'm like, cool, yeah, I'm just going to live my life on the basis of flipping a coin. Like, I'm not Harvey Dent from Batman. I'm not like to be Two-Face and just make decisions based on heads or tails. But he said, no, and I don't even need a coin now, right? I can mentally flip a coin and assume it lands on a specific decision and giving my knee-jerk reactions to which direction I want to go. So I'm at that cross, I'm like, left or right, what if, what if, what if? I do just go, well, they landed on right. I'm like, I don't really like that. And then I go left, or I go back. That's the final thing, I think, to say on this, is that most people, if they come to me for advice a lot of the time, because I'm an advisor for startups. But what I find time after time after time is that most people aren't looking for advice. They almost always know what the answer is that they want. They're actually just looking for permission. And so my job was to give them permission to go and do the thing that they already knew they want to do, and they in some cases already know how to do. They just need someone to tell them it's okay to go and do it. Is that comment on larger society as a whole? Maybe. But it's probably them fighting against something that you could cut out their own intuition, and having someone come in and give them an objective reason to say yes. But I am their coin flip in many cases. And so, yeah, I might just done myself out of a load of business by stating that on this podcast. But no, the reality is that, that's one piece of many, but it's a really core piece. And it's always impossible to do for yourself. Like, I can't do that for myself. I need someone else to tell me it's okay. I need someone else's permission to follow my own intuition. But that's what intuition means to me, I think. And I'm learning more and more about it all the time. And sometimes it means I do delve into the world that's a little bit more spiritual than I would normally be. But anything that is holistic and spiritual and, mysterious is often science that hasn't been explained yet. So I like to tread that line carefully. It interests me.
I'm sure as this podcast grows, we'll kind of explore that more with different people who have the research and stuff kind of to back that up, because that's a challenge, kind of maybe I wouldn't call it a challenge, a curiosity I have, when I'm trying to make decisions. I remember you telling that story when you came up to the Gloucester meetup, I think, or maybe it was at a Bristol meetup. And I remember at the time, and it just kind of brought it back to me. I was like, wow, like, because it summarizes a lot of in terms of what I've learned around kind of intuition and stuff, in terms of like, we have like our mind. So as I mentioned beforehand, like our mental chatter, which is quite kind of loud, which oftentimes when it's so loud, we can't clearly hear or feel what our kind of, or sense what our intuition is telling us, because our mind is just kind of all over the place. I definitely have that. And so obviously there are like breathing practices that I kind of do now to kind of calm my mind, etc. And then there was this program I took kind of on intuition, was about then just like dropping into like dropping into yourself, right? So like it talks about dropping into like your heart center, just to like quiet the mind. And then when I'm like in that place, I'm able to then think more clearly to make the best decision. One thing I've also realized in terms of like on decision making, actually, sometimes I can become quite indecisive, and I kind of realize that actually go through that process, drop in, and then just like make a decision, because it's like through making a decision, like you're never then going to know the alternative of the other kind of path, right? So, but if you kind of move, but like if you kind of move fast enough, then you can learn from that decision and then like go again, right? And so there's kind of all these little tactics and kind of things that I try and apply. But yeah, I'm definitely someone who I think I want to activate intuition more, but then I've kind of realized that actually intuition is a skill. It's not just something, you got to do the things like we're talking about, right? Got to listen to it, got to like quiet the mind, got to drop in, got to do the things that we're kind of saying and kind of sharing from our experience. So yeah,
I think I think one of the things that I would just add to that is that like there's a lot of biology that goes into this as well beyond the gut. As far as I'm aware, I think statistically we're technically functionally blind for about 50% of the day, right? And I don't mean that because we're sleeping, but I mean the fact that like our peripheral vision isn't something we're actually observing. It's something that our brain has seen and is then therefore filling in the rest of the time while we're not directly looking at it. If something flies into our vision, then we have a reaction that will happen before our brain is even rationally thought about it, right? What brakes? If there's a car coming into the side, that's what brakes, and I've not really considered there's a car coming in, and those things are happening because my body knows to react before I do. There are a lot of things that I think
Mm.
Formula One drivers, they have insane reaction time when they do the whole ruler catch test, right? They're catching it faster than their brain should be able to react, and so they honed that over time. Like you said, we need to practice it, we need to think about those things. But there are a lot of things. I mean, it's written already, right? We're just kind of regurgitating what someone's already written, which is about the chimp paradox, the chimp brain, right? Like those are the parts of our brain that we can be relying on more. Should we? That's the biggest question. But I'm trying to, because I think it should serve me better than I give it credit for. I'm trying to over rationalize all of something that might already be inherently within me. Is it generational? That's a bigger question that a scientist is going to have to argue with someone else probably on the podcast, and I look forward to listening to that episode. But
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
there's a lot of stuff that, I know when I'm hungry, and I should make a meal as a
Mm.
result, right? I know when I'm bored, so therefore I'm going to do something else as a result. I don't usually question why I'm bored, how I'm bored, should I do that, etc., etc. I think overanalyzing can slow us down a bit quite a lot of the time, and there is an
Sure.
irony in overanalyzing intuition in itself. It gets quite
Sure.
dense out, but
Yeah.
that can be quite ironic, I guess. But yeah, I'm looking forward to listening to more episodes about this stuff, and learning as much as I can from viewing and the experts you have on.
It's interesting you kind of mentioned there in terms of like when we're hungry, we go and get food, etc. When maybe to like a lot of these senses, then we kind of if it's sleep, unless we're kind of hustlers, right? Like we might feel tired and not go to bed, but essentially like our body kind of gives us these signals, right? And then I think it's quite often the case with smaller, bigger life decisions that we have. But oftentimes, I think it comes back to trust. I don't think, for at least from my experience, and I'm kind of trying to develop more of it, being able to trust myself, being able to even trust that feeling that I have to go down that path or go down that path. And, why is that? I think maybe that's a result of kind of our experiences growing up, sorry. Like if we're repeatedly told a certain message, maybe like, you're not good enough, etc., and then we get like this intuition, right, around something. Are we going to trust it? I mean, there's probably thousands of kind of different reasons. But yeah, it just kind of made me think about that. And in terms of like how, with most things, like our body kind of knows and we don't question, oh, I'm hungry, I'm, go and get food. We just do it. And I'm wondering what would happen if we apply the same to other decisions and choices in our life, and how that would, as you say, how that would serve us.
Well, I think, this is possibly like a final subject to bring this all back together from a relationship point of view, an intuition point of view, a self-awareness point of view, which is that, that 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 trust is also built, like you said, you related to that, but I think it's built in ways that we often don't get credit for, in ways that I would call social currency. I don't think I'm the first person to use that title. I think there's probably a book by that title already, which is annoying, so that's going to be the title I managed it. But social currency is something that we build up over time. It's not something we write down. It's not something that's objective. I just know that if I've done stuff for other people, that they will value me as a result, and I can build that up and build that up and build that up. And over time, they, as a community and as a people, will inherently, intuitively trust me because I've done so much for so many people. And that is objective social currency that I can cash in. Now, I can't pay my rent with it. Can't call my landlord and say, hey, they're really a nice guy in the last 10 years. Can I not pay rent? They're going to say no. But actually, that sometimes might not be the case. There might be a case where someone very rich has a spare house for a couple of months and is like, do you want to just come and stay? And that one might be an earned stay because I've helped that person or I've helped people they know. And so that's how society works for richer people, but that's how that works on an even smaller scale as well, right? Like if you introduce me to someone, you're doing it because you trust them, you trust me, and you expect us both to get a mutual gain from it in most cases, right? So we're going to have that conversation. We'll go for a period apart, and as a result, if we do get on, our social value of you goes up. Now, as a result of that, my intuition, whenever anything involves you, comes along next time, it's a much easier decision. And I not consciously remember that you did that intro or that was the relationship I had. But those things are going into my life experiences somewhere in the brain up here that I've probably stowed away from conversations I've had in the past with you. I will remember what I was talking about here. And that builds up social currency. And so that social currency, I think, plays out at a larger scale in community, in society, in groups, in towns and cities. And turns into positions of leadership, positions of influence, positions of trust and nurture. That's where mayors come from, right? They do something to earn enough trust, to get enough votes, to get into a position of power. Social currency. It's either bought or earned, ideally the latter, but sometimes the former. And so, you know, you can only do that effectively and proactively. We all do it passively. You can only do it effectively and proactively if you're self-aware enough to understand that social currency exists, to understand and trust your own intuition, and know that it's made up of micro signals that you've gathered over your whole life from other people and other experiences, and it's really effectively used when you know the effect that it has on other people. And I'm not talking about going so far as to manipulate people. I'm just talking about going about your day-to-day life, conscious of it, and knowing that it might have an impact on others, and therefore it might have an impact on your own eventual circumstances. And that's how society goes, right? That's how the leader of a tribe was found, because they were the ones that were the most helpful, the most brave, the most something, right? They earned that trust, and everybody followed that person. Those are the people that we try to find for our community. And so our community, bit different in Rebellious Co's communities. Those people are the people that are all the leaders of their own mini communities, their own mini tribes, their own mini groups, right? And they're the nano influencers would be the probably the modern term. And that's all learned from intuition, social currency, relationship building, connecting with others and helping others, and that's how the world goes, right?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I'm a bit conscious of your time. So where can people go to learn more about Rebel Meetups if they are a creative, a rebel, right? Where's the best place to find you?
Well, they should firstly attend your events in Gloucester.
Yeah, if they're passing.
If they're passing, if they're dropping in, they should definitely do that. If they're not in Gloucester, have no fear. We run over 150 events now in 13 cities. We're growing them internationally. If you are interested in attending them, you can just visit rebelmeetups.com and you should be able to find us there. We are working on repositioning things under Rebellious Co, so search that at some point. Anyone when this podcast comes out, they might find us there. But if you're in a city where you want to connect people and use the stuff that we spoke about today, and it feels right to do that, then get in touch, and we'll happily help you launch an event in your city as well. And then if anybody's building a startup and anyone feels slightly different, and we're here to support them too, because we've got a whole bunch of other people just like that, just like you, just like me, and we'll find a home for them for sure. So that's us. Rebellious Co, Rebel Meetups, different, and obviously just fun with me, and I'm a conduit to everything else, I guess. So super easy that way.
Ash, thank you. It's been a pleasure today. I've loved everything that we've spoken about, diving into relationships. Obviously, you actually started off with your journey, your story, the challenges that you've had, trust, and then ended on intuition, which is something that I'm very fascinated about. So thank you for your time. I appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, buddy. And I'm going to be tuning in as a regular subscriber. So keep it up. Thank you.
Head on over to rebelmeetups.com if you would like to check out Rebel Meetups and all of the amazing work that Ash is doing. We have a growing list of locations. I'm the local host for Gloucester, my local city, and I know that we have a growing list of locations. So if there is not a city near you right now, I know there will be very, very soon. We're expanding across Europe, with Poland actually the recent country that we have been expanded in. Head on over to rebelmeetups.com if you want to check out the meetups and join one. And who knows, you may want to become a local host as well. I know that Ash and the team are always looking for the right people to become local hosts. So you might be that right person. Also, today's episode is actually brought to you by Riverside FM. That's how I record podcast episodes. And so without Riverside, I'm unable to record. Now, there are other platforms out there. Of course there are, but they don't have the features and the functionality that Riverside FM does. So if you're a podcaster, or want to start your own podcast, I would highly recommend Riverside FM. You can get started today by using the link in the description of this podcast episode. There's links below. So I would highly recommend checking out Riverside FM. They have some really cool features, the ability to create magic clips using AI. They have the ability to record episodes in basically browser. So that means you don't need to use another tool. You can do everything within Riverside FM, which is a massive time saver. And they've actually just integrated recently with Spotify podcasters. And finally, I know that really soon they're bringing out the functionality to be able to feature 4K, which is just going to be a complete game changer. So if you're a podcaster, get on to Riverside if you want to